Hi, welcome back. So we are trying to get through the rest of Tale of Despereaux. It's so good, and it's getting really, really good here in the next few chapters. So we are on chapter 35, The Knight in Shining Armor. Despereaux was pondering the reverse of that question. He was wondering not what he would do with his tail, but what he would do without it. He was sitting on a bag of flour high atop a shelf in the pantry, crying for what he had lost. The pain in his hindquarters was intense, and he wept because of it. He also cried because he was happy. He was out of the dungeon. He had been recalled to life. His rescue had happened just in time for him to save the Princess P from the terrible fate that the rat had planned for her. So Despereaux wept with joy and with pain and with gratitude. He wept with exhaustion and despair and hope. He wept with all the emotions of a young mouse who had been sent to his death and then been delivered from it in time to save his beloved can feel. Reader, the mouse wept. And then he lay down on the sack of flour and slept. Outside the castle, the sun set and the stars came out one by one and then disappeared and gave way to the rising sun. And still Despereaux slept, and while he slept, he dreamed. He dreamed of the stained glass windows and the dark of the dungeon. In Despereaux's dream, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, in the shape of a knight swinging a sword. The knight fought in the dark, and the dark stood many shapes. The dark took many shapes. First, the dark was his mother, uttering phrases in French, and then the dark became his father, beating the drum. The dark was Furlough, wearing a black hood and shaking his head no, and then the dark became a huge rat, smiling a smile that was evil and sharp. The dark, Despereaux cried, turning his head to the left. The light, he murmured, turning his head to the right. He called out to the knight. He shouted, "Who are you? Will you save me?" But the knight did not answer him. "Tell me who you are," Despereaux shouted. The knight stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I don't." "You do," said the knight. He slowly took the armor off his head and revealed nothing, no one. The suit of armor was empty. "No, no, no, no," said Despereaux. "There is no knight in the shining armor. It's all just make-believe, like happily ever after." And in his sleep, reader, the small mouse began to cry. Chapter 36, What Mig Carried. And while the mouse slept, Roscuro put his terrible plan into effect. Would you like to hear, reader, how it all unfolded? The story is not a pretty one. There is violence in it and cruelty, but stories that are not pretty have certain value too, I suppose. Everything, as you well know, having lived in this world long enough to have figured out a thing or two for yourself, cannot always be sweetness and light. Listen, this is how it happened. First, the rat finished once and for all the job that he had started long ago. He chewed through Gregory's rope, all the way through it, so that the jailer became lost in the maze of the dungeon. Late at night, when the castle was dark, the serving girl Megarisau climbed the stairs to the princess's room. In her hand she carried a candle, and in the pockets of her apron were two very ominous things. In the right pocket, hidden in a case they should encounter anyone on the stairs, was a rat with a spoon on his head and a cloak of red around his shoulders. In the left pocket was a kitchen knife, the same knife that Megarisau had used to cut off the tail of a certain mouse. These were the things, a rat, a knife, and a candle, that Meg carried with her as she climbed the stairs. Up, up, up. "Gore!" shouted the rat. "Ain't it dark in here?" "Yes, yes." "Gore," she shouted to the rat. "It's dark, ain't it?" "Yes, yes," whispered Roscuro from her pocket. "It is quite dark, my dear." "When I'm princess," began Meg. "Shh," said Roscuro. "May I suggest that you keep your glorious plans for your future to yourself? And may I further suggest that you keep your voice down to a whisper? We are, after all, on a covert mission." Covert means secret. "Do you know how to whisper, my dear?" "I do," shouted Meg. "Then please," said Roscuro, "please institute this knowledge immediately." "Gore," whispered Meg. "All right." "Thank you," said Roscuro. "Do I need to review with you our plan of action?" "I got it all straight right here in my head," whispered Meg, and she tapped the side of her head with one finger. "How comforting," said Roscuro. "Perhaps, my dear, we should go over it again one more time just to be sure." "Well," said Meg, "we go into the princess's room, and she will be sleeping and snoozing and snoring, and I will wake her up and show her the knife and say, 'If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me.'" "And you will not hurt her," said Roscuro. No, I won't, because I want her to live so she can be my lady-in-waiting when I become the princess. Exactly, said Roscuro. That will be her divine comeuppance. Gore, whispered Meg. Yes, her divine comeuppance. Meg had, of course, no idea what the phrase divine comeuppance meant, but she very much liked the sound of it, and she repeated it over and over to herself until Roscuro said, "And then?" "And then," continued Meg, "I tells her to get out of her princess bed and come with me on a little journey." "Ha," said Roscuro, "a little journey, that is right. Ha! I love the understatement of that phrase. A little journey. Oh, it will be a little journey indeed, it will. And then," said Mig, who was now coming to her favorite part of the plan, "we take her to the deep downs and we give her some long lessons in how to be a serving girl. And we give me some short lessons on how to be a princess. And when is all done studying up, we switch places. I gets to be the princess and she gets to be the maid. Gore." Reader, this is the very plan that Roscuro presented to Mig when he first met her. It was, of course, a ridiculous plan. No one would ever, not for one blind minute, mistake Mig for the princess, or the princess for Mig. But Miggery Sow, as I pointed out to you before, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And reader, too, she wanted so desperately to become a princess. She wanted, oh, how she wanted it. And it was because of this terrible wanting that she was able to believe Roscuro's plan with every ounce of her heart. The rat's real plan was, in a way, more simple and in a way more terrible. He intended to take the princess to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon. He intended to have Mig put chains on the princess's hands and her feet, and he intended to keep the glittering, glowing, laughing princess there in the dark forever. Chapter 37, A Small Taste. She was asleep and dreaming of her mother, the queen, who was holding out a spoon to her and saying, "Taste this, my sweet pea. Taste this, my darling, and tell me what you think." The princess leaned forward and sipped some soup from the spoon her mother held out to her. "Oh, Mamma," she said, "it's wonderful. It's the best soup I have ever eaten." "Yes," said the queen, "it is wonderful, isn't it?" "May I have some more?" said the pea. "I gave you a small taste so that you would not forget," said her mother. "I gave you a small taste so that you would remember." "I want more." But as soon as the princess said this, her mother was gone. She disappeared, and the bowl and the soup spoon disappeared along with her. "Lost things," said the pea, "more lost things." And then she heard her name. She turned, happy, thinking that her mother had come back. But the voice was not her mother's. The voice belonged to someone else, and it was coming from someplace far away, and it was telling her to wake up, wake up. The pea opened her eyes and saw Miggery Sow standing over her bed, a knife in one hand and a candle in the other. "Mig," she said. "Gore," said Mig softly. "Say it," commanded Roscuro. Mig closed her eyes and shouted her piece. "If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me." "Whatever for?" said the princess in an annoyed tone. As I have noted before, the princess was not a person who was used to being told what to do. "What are you talking about?" Mig opened her eyes and shouted, "You gotta come with me, so after we take some lessons, you some long lessons and me some short ones, together way down in the deep downs, I can be you and you can be me." "No," shouted Roscuro from Mig's pocket. "No, no, no, you were doing it wrong." "Who said that?" "Your Highness," said Roscuro, and he crawled out of Mig's pocket and made its way up to her shoulder and situated himself there, laying his tail across her neck to balance himself. "Your Highness," he said again, and he raised the spoon slowly off his head and smiled, displaying his mouth full of truly hideous teeth. "I think it would be best if you do as Miggery Sow suggests. She is, as you can quite clearly see, in possession of a knife, a large knife, and she will, if pushed, use it." "This is ridiculous," said the princess. "You can't threaten me. I'm a princess." "We," said Roscuro, "are all too aware of the fact of what you are. A knife, however, cares nothing for the fact that you are royalty, and you will bleed, I assume, just like any other human." The pea looked at Mig. Mig smiled. The knife glinted in the light of the candle. "Mig," she said, her voice shaking the tiniest bit. "I really do not think," said Roscuro, "that Mig would need much persuasion to use that knife, princess. She is a dangerous individual, easily led." "But we are friends," said the pea, "aren't we, Mig?" "Huh?" said Mig. "Trust me," said Roscuro, "you are not friends, and I think it would be best if you addressed all of your communications to me, princess. I am the one in charge here. Look at me." The pea looked right directly at the rat and at the spoon on his head. Her heart skipped one beat and then two. "Do you know me, Princess?" "No," she said, lowering her head. "I don't know you." But reader, she did know him. He was the rat who had fallen in her mother's soup, and he was wearing her dead mother's spoon on his head. The princess kept her head down. She concentrated on containing the rage that was leaping up inside her. "Look again, Princess, or can you not bear to look? Does it pain your royal sensibilities to let your eyes rest on a rat?" "I don't know you," she said, "and I am not afraid to look at you." The pea raised her head slowly. Her eyes were defiant. She stared at the rat. "Very well," said Roscuro, "have it your way. You do not know me. Nonetheless, you must do as I say, as my friend here has a knife. So get out of bed, Princess. We are going on a little journey. I would like it if you dressed in your loveliest gown, the one that you were wearing at the banquet not so long ago." So we got, and do you know me, Princess? So here, there's Miggery Sow. And can you see the princess in bed? And do you see the rat? What do you think's going to happen next? Oh, look at the size of that knife. Oh, my. "And put on your crown," said Mig. Put that on your princess head." "Yes," said Roscuro. "Please, Princess, do not forget your crown." The pea, still staring at Roscuro, pushed the covers back and got out of bed. "Move quickly," said Roscuro. "We must take our little journey while it's still dark, and while the rest of the castle sleeps on, ignorant, oh so ignorant. I'm afraid of your fate." The princess took a gown from her closet. "Yes," said Roscuro to himself, "that's the one, the very one. Look at how it sparkles in the light. Lovely." "I will need someone to do my buttons," said the princess as she stepped into the dress. "Meg, you must help me." "Little princess," said Roscuro, "do you think that you can outsmart a rat? Our dear Miggery Sow will not lay down her knife, not even for a moment. Will you, Miggery Sow? Because that might ruin your chances of becoming a princess. Isn't that right?" "Gore," said Mig, "that's right." And so while Mig held the knife pointed in the direction of the princess, the pea sat and let the rat crawl over her back, doing her buttons up for her one by one. The princess held very still. The only moment she allowed herself was this. She licked her lips over and over again because she thought that she could taste there the sweet saltiness of the soup that her mother had fed her in her dream. "I have not forgotten, Mama," she whispered. "I have not forgotten you, and I have not forgotten the soup." Chapter 38, To the Dungeon. The strangest threesome made their way down the golden stairs of the castle. The princess and Mig walked side by side, and Roscuro hid himself again in the pocket of Mig's apron, and Mig pointed the sharp tip of the knife at the princess's back, and together they went down, down, down. The princess was led to her fate as around her everyone slept. The king slept in his giant bed with his crown on his head and his hands crossed on his chest, dreaming that his wife, the queen, was a bird with green and gold feathers who called him by his name, Philip, 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 without ceasing. Cook slept in a too small bed off the kitchen, dreaming of a recipe for soup that she could not find. "Where did I put that?" she mumbled in her sleep. "Where did that recipe go? For it was the queen's favorite soup. I must find it." And not far from the cook, in the pantry atop a bag of flour, slept the mouse Despereaux, dreaming, as you know, reader, of knights in shining armor, of darkness and of light. And in the whole of the darkened, sleeping castle there was only the light of the candle in the hand of Miggery Sow. The candle shone on the princess's dress and made it sparkle, and the princess walked tall in the light, trying not to be afraid. In this story, reader, we have talked about the heart of the mouse and the heart of the rat and the heart of the serving girl, Miggery Sow, but we have not talked about the heart of the princess. Like most hearts, it was complicated, shaded with dark and dappled with light. The dark things in the princess's heart were these: a very small, very hot, burning coal of hatred for the rat who was responsible for her mother's death. On the other darkness was a tremendous sorrow, a deep sadness that her mother was dead and that the princess could now only talk to her in her dreams. And what of the light in the princess's heart? Reader, I am pleased to tell you that P was a kind person, and perhaps more important, she was empathetic. Do you know what it means to be empathetic? I will tell you. It means that when you are being forcibly taken to a dungeon where you have a large knife pointed at your back, when you are trying to be brave, you are still able to think for a moment of the person who is holding that knife. You are able to think, oh, poor Mig, she wants to be a princess so badly, and she thinks this is the way. Poor Mig, what it must be like to want something that desperately. That is, reader, empathy. And now you have a small map of the princess's heart: hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. The heart that she carried inside of her as she went down the golden stairs and through the kitchen, and finally, just as the sky outside of the castle began to lighten, down into the dark of the dungeon with the rat and the serving girl. Okay, we're going to stop there. Hope you enjoyed those chapters. We will start chapter 39 next time.